So one of the nice things about Moen bathroom faucets is they come with a lifetime warranty on replacement parts. But before you call a plumber, if your faucet is like this, where it takes a lot to pull in and out, which oftentimes happens after about a year or so, or if you find that the faucet is actually leaking and you can only get it to stop leaking when you turn it a certain way or push it in really hard, it's actually a fairly easy fix to remedy both these problems. One of the things you'll want to do is identify exactly which faucet you have. Moen technically only warranties the faucet to the original owner, although if you call them and describe your faucet and ask just for some simple replacement parts, they may be willing to give them to you. What you see here is, this is their silicone lubricating grease, and this is what you need if your faucet is just very hard to pull in and out and you want to get it to move nice and loosely again. These are actually replacement cartridges. These are for this faucet that they sent me as well. The reason why they sent these is because there's a plastic tool inside that you need to help loosen the faucet. I only needed the tool, but they said that they would only send the tool with the new cartridge, which, hey, that's great for me. Now when they ask you what the model number is for your faucet, you may have no idea, or you may not be able to find it. I find that with this one, actually, in another faucet in the house, I sent them pictures, and they've been able to use the pictures to determine which faucet it is and what parts I needed. So before you do any work on your faucet, the first thing you're going to need to do is shut off the water to the faucet. For the most part, underneath your sink you should see two valves, one for the hot water and one for the cold. You'll need to close these off by turning them clockwise. Now, if you haven't ever turned your valves before, you've got to be careful, because a lot of times these may build up with deposits inside and they're very hard to turn, or you might start to turn them and then they start to leak. So be prepared for that and make sure that you can turn them freely. I actually go around the house once a year and turn all these valves, and that helps to keep them from ever freezing up. Okay, so now that you've got your water shut off, or you think you do, make sure that it is just by pulling it out and testing it. As I said, if you haven't turned your shut-off valves off in a long time, they may leak, and they would probably need replacement before you could begin any other work on the faucet. So the next step is to take off the faucet handle head. Sometimes what you can do is just reach in here with your fingernails and just pull this right out. If not, take a small flathead screwdriver and just try to work it in there a bit without breaking anything or without really scratching it. It'll probably look pretty dirty like that underneath, so you might want to clean that out when you take it off too. Next, you take a Phillips head screwdriver and hold on to the faucet, or you can just turn it that way, and then unscrew the retaining screw. Once the retaining screw is out, just pull the head right off the faucet. And what you see in here is the internal cartridge. You want to take one of your small screwdrivers and carefully pull out this retaining ring here. And make sure you don't drop it down there too. Set that aside. And then this outer sheath also should pull right off. This would also be a good time. You see that you'll have a lot of hard water deposits in here if you want to get these cleaned up too. You could certainly do that with some CLR or just by rubbing them off. What you see next is this retaining clip here. So this has to come out. Now mine came out fairly easy. You can also use just a small pair of pliers to get the clip on the end. Next, we'll use one of the special tools that Moen sends you in order to help loosen the faucet cartridge. A few years ago they sent me one of these, which I actually think is for a different faucet, perhaps that one extends a lot further down, like a shower faucet or something along those lines. What I'm going to do, you can use this. What I'm also going to do is I'm going to use the plastic tools that came with the cartridges and then use that to loosen the faucet. So one of the things about the cartridges inside these faucets is they tend to get stiff and they tend to get stuck after a while. So that's why Moen sends you this special little plastic tool. What you do is slide the tool so that it fits right over these plastic ridges here. So you can see on here where this is not all the same around the edge. Just going to slide that in there. So then what you do is you take your pliers, or I have vice grips here, you put it on there and just move it, turn it back and forth a few times like that to loosen the cartridge, and then it should come out. Now one of the things that Moen says to do to get the cartridge out is to take your pliers and just grip it right here and just yank the whole thing out. But that'll scratch up the cartridge pretty good, and especially if you don't need to replace the whole cartridge yet, but you're just going to be lubricating it so that it moves easily again. What I do is I take the screw that first held in the faucet head and I'll screw that back in a little bit. And then I'll take my pliers and hold onto the screw that way and then pull it out. So now that I've threaded the screw in, I'm going to try to get the cartridge out with one hand. Usually these are a bit stiff still, so you might have to give it a good pull. There we are. Now one thing to make sure you do is as you take this out, try to keep the top side up so you know where it is. Because otherwise if you have this reversed somehow, when you put it back in, the hot and cold will also be reversed. Now you could fix that by just taking it out and moving it around again, but that's just an extra unnecessary step. So now in order to get your faucet moving freely again, what you want to do is take some of your Moen silicone grease that they gave you. What you do is you just cut the top off of the plastic, this envelope here, but you're only going to need a very small amount of grease. If you put too much in there, the faucet's going to slide way too easily, and in fact it might not even stay open, it'll just close by itself. So you just need a little bit, and I'm going to show you where you put it. So I'm holding the cartridge in my hand, and when I push the cartridge top down like this, you're going to see on the bottom this piece pops out, and there's a little rubber O-ring right here. What you're going to want to do is put a small amount of grease on that O-ring, and then you'll also see on the side here, where this comes through, there's a little hole. When you push this back in some, you're going to notice that there's actually a black O-ring inside that hole there. So you're going to want to put a little bit of grease inside this hole as well. And as I said, you really only need a small amount, just a little bit, and I'll try to show you exactly how much. That's really all, just like a little drop. Just work that around with your finger. And then on this inside hole here, put some in there. And then try to push that in and move that up and down a bit. And then I'll actually turn this around a full turn. Again, keeping in mind, trying to make sure that I haven't messed up the alignment so that I don't end up putting this back in and having the hot and cold water reversed. I'm going to actually add a little bit more here just to show you what happens if you put too much in. If you put too much grease in, it won't be too much of a problem after a while because some of the excess grease will wear out and then the faucet will work as it's supposed to. So then that's really it. Now we're just ready to put the cartridge back in and put everything back together. So what you notice you may notice when I took it out, I noticed that this part, this indentation was facing left. So I tried to keep it that way to make sure again that when I put this in, I don't have the hot and cold reversed. You just kind of slide the cartridge back inside and push it in. And you'll know that it's far enough in when you look and try to put in this retaining clip again. So you notice I'm pushing it, but it's not going in. So that means I don't have this pushed down quite far enough, so I have to push it down a bit more. One easy way to do that is just put your plastic tool on here again and give it a good push with your hand. And you'll notice then that these top plastic sections should be pretty close to aligned with the top of the faucet. Slide your retaining ring in. And again, don't force it. If it's not going in easily, that means it's probably just misaligned a little bit. So you want to take your plastic tool and turn that a little bit. So now once the cartridge is at the right height, you'll see that the retaining clip actually should slide in fairly easily. And then we'll put our sheath back on. This small retaining ring, slide that over the top. And then you're set to just put your faucet handle back on. Put that screw back in. Now, I didn't clean that up this time, but normally I would. Put the corded cover on. You notice that's getting a bit old too. I'm actually going to check with Moen and see if they'll give me a replacement one of those as well. Next, you want to turn the water back on to your faucet, each side. As you do, just make sure you check for leaks. Again, sometimes if these handles haven't been turned in a while, they may drip water out, so you want to have something to catch that water, especially if you're not going to be replacing these valves. Sometimes they'll leak for a little bit and then they'll actually stop after a day or two. But you want to keep an eye on that. If you do, you shouldn't have any water dripping out of them. If you do, then you're going to want to get those replaced. And then just give it a test and you'll find it comes out a lot more easily. This one actually, apparently I put in the right amount of grease because it's not sliding back in. Sometimes if you put in too much grease and have it only open a little bit, it'll slide back in all by itself, but this is about, I guess I got it right that time. So that should be good for at least a year, a couple years, and then if it gets tight again, just repeat the procedure and lubricate it again. Of course, if you decide that you don't necessarily want to reuse the old cartridge and they send you a new one, you could always just put the new one in as well. The procedure would be exactly the same. I tend to hold on to these until I have a problem with maybe a cartridge actually not really holding water well anymore, where it'll still leak out of the faucet even though the faucet is fully off. We had that happen once. So I'll hold on to these, and then I know that if I ever need them, I can just replace the cartridge that is not functioning anymore with one of these new ones. So I hope this was helpful for you. If you want to keep your old faucet and not have to replace a faucet, it's an easy way just to get your old faucet working like new again.